Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are about to begin the 2041 season. Have actually been fairly active over the last 3 days since the end of spring training online. Made a number of trades, kind of just cleaning up our minor league system, getting rid of a couple of players that weren't in our short and long term plans. But we did actually make one trade that is going to have an impact on the 26-man lineup. And where we could, we also did try to pick up a little cash in trades. You can see less than $2 million, but every little tiny bit of cash helps with a organization like the Pirates. But you can see lots of moves of people among our minor league system as we kind of got the team ready for the year. But the only substantive trade was this one right here. We traded left fielder Omar Guzman, not really a prospect. Third baseman Danny Glenn, not a great prospect. Backup outfielder Jordan Owens, who is a excellent glove, hasn't been a great hitter for us at the major league level, although he was pretty productive in 2038. Spent all of last year down in Indianapolis. He was going to be our backup outfielder, or one of our backup outfielders this year. Right fielder Eddie Miranda, non-prospect. And second baseman Mike DeJesus, nice personality, captain personality to have in your minor league system, but 26 years old, clearly not a prospect at this point. And we got Ramon Herrera from the A's, who is okay defensively for a center fielder. Certainly like the range, the error rating, and the arm. Would prefer that they were a little bit better. But he is a somewhat proven major league hitter. At this point in his career, he's got a 103 OPS plus, 103 WRC plus. So he's been a slightly above average offensive player by those two metrics. Not making a ton of money, and we were able to get the A's to actually retain 50% of his contract. And he is actually going to slot in as our new starting center fielder. He's also a left-handed bat. Don't know if you noticed that or not, so that gives us a little more balance. But that sends Ignacio Carbajal, who's been our starting center fielder the last 2 seasons, to the bench. He's got a great glove, so I think that he will still potentially have some value as a defensive substitute and certainly a backup when Herrera cannot play. But with Andres Mendez, who's now in his second full season, kind of as our DH, with Herrera in center field, and with the free agent signing of Alex Perkins in left field, that gives us 3 left-handed bats in the starting lineup now, and then Carbajal is a left-handed bat off the bench. Certainly still not even in terms of our lefties and righties. We're definitely a righty-dominated lineup in terms of our hitters, but feel that Herrera is a step up with the bat compared to Carbajal. Hope we don't lose too much having him out there in center field, because pitching and defense has been what's made this team successful in the past. But felt it was a trade that we had to make. We actually saved some money in the trade, because what we're paying Herrera is actually less than what we were going to be paying Owens to be a backup outfielder for us. And we still do have Carbajal signed for another couple years at $3.2 million. So given the likelihood that we'll probably have to be moving on from Herrera after this season when his number goes up to $7 million, Carbajal is still in the near to medium term plans of this Pirates franchise. And with that, we will think about getting the season underway. I feel like this Pirates team is better than it was last year, and it should be. Just 79 wins last season in a disappointing season after a playoff appearance in an NL Central championship in 2039. So we've made progress over our 3 years, but it's absolutely time to have a winning record and to compete for a playoff berth. The big changes we've made is we've added Greg Gaylord into the starting rotation this year, brought on Hugo Macias in the bullpen, and then also have Rule 5 draft pick Juan Melendez on the Major League roster. So the pitching staff, which has been one of the best in the National League over the past few seasons, largely unchanged. The lineup a lot different. Quinones and Holloway are new as our starting catcher and a backup catcher. Alex Gaines is temporarily our first baseman. We'll have to decide what happens to him after that. Our real starting first baseman is Adrian Oliva, career 300 hitter who we picked up final year of his contract. He's going to be a free agent. He's looking for over $20 million. Certainly won't be back with us next year, but we traded a big package of prospects and non-prospects to Tampa Bay, got them to keep 75% of his contract. So he gives us another proven bat, and importantly, another left-handed bat in the lineup when he is back off the IL to really balance out the roster a little bit more. Jose Cuevas is starting right now. He'll likely be out of the lineup. Actually, he's only starting at DH, but a decent bat, not much of a fielder. He's new to the team. Victor Serrano came up at the end of last year, is now our second baseman. Luis Linares, we traded for at the trade deadline last year, now our full-time shortstop. Alex Perkins, we mentioned, we signed as a free agent. And then we just made the trade for Ramon Herrera. So we've brought on a lot of bats, and with Herrera, Perkins, and Oliva, left-handed bats who are proven major league hitters in the cases of Oliva and Herrera, which should help us. So I think the offense should be better this year. Obviously, it doesn't have to improve too much from being one of the worst offenses in baseball to be better. But the hope is that the pitching and defense remain sound. We can score some more runs this year. And ultimately that lets us get to a winning record. But winning record would be fine. But that's kind of table stakes. We were close to a winning record even in a disappointing season last year. We want to be competing for a playoff spot this year. Absolute minimum is to be over 500. But I'd really like to get this team back into the playoffs. And we also need to improve our stolen bases. Haven't really focused on that in the offseason. If it happens, it happens. We will take a look at the preseason predictions and see what it looks like. Our old team, the Royals, continues to be strong, looking for a 98-64 record, which would be the second best behind the trash can banging Houston Astros. And here in the National League, we're expected to have a winning record, but that 84-78 would leave us on the outside of the playoffs looking in. It looks like we would miss out on the wild card by a game behind the Cardinals if that comes true. Isaiah Hill, expected to have another big year. The issue with him is that his arbitration number next year expected to be over $9 million when he stops making the major league minimum. He is actually willing for the first time to just out of the blue on his own talk a contract extension with us, but $27 million over 10 years is certainly not something that the Pirates can afford. It might make sense to do it just to have kind of certainty in the contract for the next couple of seasons as he's going through his arbitration years, because last I looked, he was expected to be making about $21 million each of the second and third seasons of arbitration for him, and still $21 million each of those years after 9.4. So I guess the thought is, do we sign him to this contract now where we can get his arbitration years overall for a little less than expected, and then have him with the massive contract on the other side? We're probably going to need to trade him away. I mean, it's hard to imagine that we won't, and have gotten some good advice and good thoughts in the comments on previous videos that we may need to pare back our scouting and development budgets down the line to ensure that we can keep him on the team for a few more years, which is certainly something that we're thinking about. But we'll see what happens with Mr. Hill. But definitely need to think about bringing him back, getting him signed. And somewhat surprisingly, doesn't look like we are expected to have any of the top pitchers. I think we may surprise the world on that front. But with a 84-78 record, that would achieve our goal of getting to a winning record. But quite honestly, that's just table stakes. We need to be a playoff team with one of the top handful of pitching staffs in the league and an improved offense. I don't think there's any excuse for us not to have one of the top 6 records in the National League this coming season. And we've got an offer together for Isaiah Hill. I don't know if it's going to fly or not. He's looking for 10 years at an average of $27.7 million. We're offering him 10 years at an average of $24.5 million. The important thing for us is that it would lock him up for the next 3 years at numbers that are below, and in some cases well below, what he's expected to make in arbitration. We still probably would need to move on from him at that point. I guess conceivably, if things go really well over the next few seasons, maybe we could handle 1 year at $23 million. But when it gets into the high 20s, low 30s, over the bulk of the contract, especially the years when he's in his 30s, probably something that we'd look to get out of. Obviously, if this playthrough goes incredibly well and Bob Nutting starts giving us $10, $15, $20 million budget increases annually, he's a guy that we could keep around. But keep in mind, we also do have a lot of help coming in the outfield in our minor league system. So really want to hold on to Hill for as long as possible because he's one of the best players in baseball. But I feel like we do have help coming in the outfield. We're going to go ahead and see what he thinks. He's actually willing to bring the average value down a bit and just make it an 8-year contract. I think maybe we can work something out on that front. I don't mind it if it's a little shorter. If we do need to trade it, it may be a little easier to trade it away if he's not locked up into his mid-30s as he would have been with a 10-year contract. Still would like these first few years to be as low as possible and then go up from there. But we'll see if we can meet in the middle somewhere with Isaiah. All right, Hill was looking for $25.4 million over 8 years. We actually have the average annual value at $25 million, so we're pretty close on that front, but it's definitely more backloaded than he preferred. Still have the next 3 seasons, a couple million under his arbitration number, a couple million under his arbitration number, and 7 or 8 million under his expected arbitration number to give us a chance for at least having him on the roster for the next 3 seasons if we want to. I think he'd consider this, and he's willing to think about it, so that's good. Would be great to get him locked up. 8 years, $200 million. Certainly not a contract. I would be shocked if he plays out that contract in Pittsburgh, just because I don't see any way we can possibly afford that. I guess in theory, Mr. Nutting could sell the team or move on from ownership for other reasons, and we could get a very supportive and generous owner, and it might work. But I would love to have that kind of cost certainty on Hill for the 3 seasons after this one at lower than his expected salary arbitration numbers to at least give us a fighting chance to be playing the next few years with him batting in the middle of our lineup, since he's such a critical player for us. And while we're handing out crazy contracts for the Pirates, the other guy to obviously check on is starting pitcher Ricky Gotti. His number's down to $16.7 million, which is still way more than we can afford for the long term. He is a 2-time All-Star. Really like that pitching profile. 3 above average to excellent pitches. Nice stuff, good control, acceptable movement. Sidearm pitcher who throws in the mid to high 90s. He's been over the course of his career, just kind of an average-ish pitcher when you look at the numbers. But as I mentioned, he's a two-time All-Star, and I think that his stuff suggests that if we keep a good defense behind him, he'll be a pretty effective starting pitcher. Issue is we've already got Santana signed for the long term. We've got a team option on Bobby Gonzalez for next year, which we're presumably going to exercise. Wonder what Heriberto Rosales is looking for as kind of a back end of rotation guy. Ooh, he's looking for over $7 million a year now, so that's not going to work. We still have the arbitration eligibility for Gotti next year. 11 million is going to be starting to get to be a big number. You can see it's right what Santana is going to be making, but I don't feel like we have to force things with him right now, particularly with the fact that we're going to be shelling out what I would assume is the largest contract in Pittsburgh Pirate history at $200 million over 8 years potentially to Mr. Isaiah Hill shortly. And Isaiah Hill has signed that deal. So the good thing is that the next 3 years, we've got him locked up for less than he was expected to make through arbitration. The fans are happy about it, or ecstatic about it, actually. We probably are going to need to trade him after those first 3 years, but at least we have price certainty now for those arbitration years. You can see that did give us a nice bump to fan interest. Haven't had a home game yet. We started 1-4 at the Cubbies, have a series at Toronto now, and then we'll be home against St. Louis, where we can hopefully see how our attendance is going. Looks like we may be expected to sell out this year. We'll see. We've gotten finally, after working at it for over 3 years now, got fan interest to a pretty respectable level, which is positive. Don't have a ton of money to spend on improvements, and as I talked about, we need to be a winning team this year, and in my view, we need to be a playoff team this year. So hopefully if we have some fans in the seats, we'll be able to bump those ticket prices and generate even more revenue than we're expecting to right now. And we did take 2 out of 3 in Toronto to get our record up to 3-4 as we begin our first homestand of the season, 4 games against the division rival St. Louis Cardinals. And Adrian Oliva is ready to come off of the IL. You can see we didn't do too well in that first series with St. Louis, 4-7 record now. We are going to send down Jose Cuevas. He has hit .353 in 17 at-bats. But he's the worst infielder of any of our utility infielders. Still has 1 option year left. Certainly could have him back and will have him back because we do like the bat if we have some more injuries in the infield. But wanted to keep Flavio Avanzi around because he's the only personality class captain that we have. He's better defensively, certainly not as good a hitter. And then Tony Cook was another guy we thought about sending down, but also is pretty versatile defensively. Again, not as good as a hitter, but I don't think either of these guys are going to be getting tons of at-bats. And we do want to try to kind of maintain the strong defense that we've had over the past few years. So Cuevas gets caught up in the numbers game. We are going to demote him to AAA, bring Oliva up, and presumably Oliva is going to find a spot in our lineup. Yeah, batting 5th against right-handers and 5th against left-handers. And he's actually DHing now. Alex Gaines continues to play at first base, which is fine. He's 6'3", pretty good at playing the position. So hopefully now with the left-handed bats of Perkins, Herrera, and Oliva in the lineup. And we've got now Mendez and Carvajal both coming off the bench potentially. We'll be able to score some more runs this year than we have in the past. Attendance is at capacity. Granted, that's the first 4 games of the year, so we're going to see more how the season actually goes. Those of you who have watched for a while know I only allow myself to raise the prices once a year, so certainly want to get at least a month or two into the season before potentially making that move. But looking promising if we can keep fan interest high and we can start playing better baseball, where we may have a pretty good attendance year and a pretty good revenue year for these Pirates, and maybe can bump those ticket prices a bit in a month or two. And this is why Pittsburgh can't have nice things, because Adrian Oliva played one game, actually was great in that game with a home run, drove in 2 runs, we won. And he went home and he suffered an undisclosed injury while landscaping his yard. Going to be out for about a week. I guess there's a chance he's back earlier than that, and we do have 14 position players on our roster. So I think rather than make a roster move, we're just going to kind of let him sit out for the next few days, and maybe he'll heal a little quicker than normal from his injury with the string trimmer or the lawnmower or the chainsaw or whatever he happened to be using. Maybe he just fell off a ladder. Who knows? And in some predictable news, Ignacio Carbajal has come to us and said that he's unhappy with his playing time. Obviously, he's been our starting center fielder for the last couple of years, and now 21 games into the season, he's appeared in just 4 games, so he doesn't have a hit yet. So definitely understand where he's coming from. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, we do have him signed for another few years, so it's possible he's going to be right back as our starting center fielder next season. But we did bring Herrera on board, and Herrera's hitting okay, I guess, 260 batting average, but he does have 5 doubles and 3 triples, so he is knocking some extra base hits around. 109 OPS plus, 108 WRC plus. So I think he's been more prodigious offensively than Carbajal would have been. So I don't see any reason to kind of change what we're doing there. But definitely not optimal when you've got a player in the clubhouse who may start causing some problems if he doesn't get more playing time. And I certainly would not mind seeing manager Jan Vasquez using Carbajal more consistently as a defensive substitute. Doesn't seem like that's a big part of his agenda right now. And I guess obviously at 9 and 12, we haven't had as many leads to protect in the late innings as maybe I would have liked. So Jose Cuevas is taking the anger of his demotion out in AAA, where he's hitting .476 over his first 10 games down there, and was just named the IL Player of the Week after a .600 batting average over the past week. So certainly a bat that if we have some injuries, would not mind having at the major league level in a relatively short order. And we've got another grumpy player, backup catcher Ron Holloway, who is a former 3-time All-Star and a 1-time Silver Slugger, but we brought him on to be our backup catcher, hitting just .206. We do have, with Heel down in AAA, the guy who we thought was going to be on the roster before we picked up Holloway, kind of at the start of spring training. So if his attitude gets worse, could certainly move on from him pretty easily. Taking a look at Quinones, he's hitting .224. I'd say he's a little better defensively than Holloway, so I don't see any reason for us to change things as far as Holloway's playing time right now. Well, we've made it to the month of May, and just like last season, the Pirates have gotten off to a really bad start. We were brutal last year in March and April, and then played over 500 ball after that, but still couldn't dig ourselves out of a hole. I think we're a little better this year in terms of our record, although we are 9.5 games out in the division. Checking in on the standings, the Reds having an incredible season. So definitely not the start we're looking for. And it's actually come in a different way than expected, because we have one of the worst pitching staffs and one of the worst defenses in the National League. So after having one of the best pitching staffs and a very good defense over the last couple of years, we've definitely pivoted in the wrong direction. We're middle of the pack in runs scored, which would be a nice improvement, quite honestly, if we still had one of the top pitching staffs in the league and we were middle of the pack in runs scored. Would feel a lot better about where this team was. Hopefully we can get things right. What we are going to do, though, is bring in some reinforcements. You may remember we've had Luis Longoria down in AAA. He's been good there in 4 starts, 2.25 ERA. He is absolutely ready for the majors at this point, the number 11 prospect in baseball. So we are going to bring him up now that it's May. Hopefully that will extend the service time enough that we'll have him for an extra season under our control, because we're weaselly that way when we're playing a team like the Pirates. And probably going to look to move on from Juan Melendez, the Rule 5 acquisition. He's been bad, 7.32 ERA, 27 hits allowed over 19 and 2/3 innings. Like the guy's personality, but it doesn't look like he's working out for us. Going to see if we can get anything for him in trade. Would love to do that if possible. If we can't, then we'll just send him back to the Cardinals. And we can get a little bit of cash, as well as right fielder Juan Montano, who's making the major league minimum, but San Francisco will hang on to his salary. He is in his last option year, so we'll be able to send him to AAA. Don't think he'll be playing a big role for us this year, but at least we get a little bit for Melendez, so we're going to go ahead and complete that trade. And we are going to, at long last, promote Luis Longoria to the majors. Should make him happy. Hopefully can help our team also. Longoria slots in as our number 3 starter, and that lets us move Greg Gaylord to the bullpen, and it looks like he's going to go right into our closer role. We thought when we picked him up in the trade last year that he could be a very effective reliever. You can see he's been okay as a starter. 1-2 record, 4.08 ERA, 30 strikeouts over 28 and 2/3 innings. But I think that with the fact that that last pitch is a mediocre changeup, he could be pretty special out of the bullpen. So we'll see how he does as our closer, and we'll see what Longoria does in the rotation. And see, we haven't had the same type of success with the pitching staff this year as we've had in the past. Actually going to boost Longoria's pitch count up to 90. We have kept it at 80 because he's already fragile, even though he's only 23 years old and he's been in the minors. But now that the games matter a little bit, we'll try to, not that the games actually matter, they matter more than a little bit, but we'll try to get a little more out of him, hopefully a couple extra batters a game. You can see the attendance has been choppy. Still kind of want to get another month and a half, maybe even 2 months in the season to see what the attendance situation and the revenue situation is really like before potentially jacking prices up a notch. And hopefully we'll start playing better baseball. That'll make me feel a little better about potentially increasing prices also. And despite the poor month on the field, newly signed Isaiah Hill, National League Batter of the Month, 290, 14 homers, 31 ribbies. Only a 328 on base percentage, only 3 walks. I don't know why they noted that in the commentary. And then Perkins, our new left fielder, 297, 8 homers, and 14 ribbies. He, as you can see, is hitting 301 here as a rookie. So we definitely have improved the offense. Our goal was to get it from one of the worst in the league to middle of the pack, which we have done. The issue is that our pitching staff and our defense seem to have completely fallen apart, which is not what we were planning. But I'm thinking it's just bad luck. I don't feel like we've downgraded the defense that significantly. And it's basically a lot of the same pitchers. So I think that particularly with the addition of Longoria, we should get a lot better pitching here in the month of May than we did in April. If we get to May and we're 12 games out and 10 games below 500, I'll know that I need to do something to the pitching or the defense. But I think it's probably just been a little bit of bad luck. And you can see in these early days of May, we're playing better, have the record close to 500 now at 20-22. Still 8 games back, but good to see the team playing a little better. Longoria has only pitched 2 games, 3.38 ERA, though hasn't been involved in any decisions, and you can see some of those pitchers starting to get their ERAs down. Taking a look at the actual statistics, down to 11th in the league in runs allowed, 9th in runs scored. Again, if we can stay in the top 10 in runs scored, and we can get that pitching staff back to being among the top handful in the league in terms of runs allowed, I think we've definitely got a chance to have the type of season that we'd like. Can see playing a lot better here in May after the slow starts in March and April. And another month into the season, fan interest slowly fading away, but the team is playing better. You can see we've gotten the record up to 29-31, so May was a very good month for this team. 16-12 record, so kind of reverse the damage that we did in April. Hopefully we can put another winning month together in June, get the record above 500. 7 games out in the division, tied for 11th in runs scored and 10th in the National League in runs allowed. So we're slowly moving in the right direction with our pitching staff, and our starters ERA is 5th in the National League, but we are kind of fading a little bit with our batting, which isn't optimal. As I said earlier, if we can have a top 10 offense, I think our pitching staff will eventually get us to where we need to be. Taking a look at the standings, 7 games out in the division, as I mentioned. Taking a look at the wild card, 4.5 out there. So if we can put a winning month together in June, get the record for the season over 500, I don't think we're going to be poorly positioned when we get to the midpoint of the season. You can see Isaiah Hill having another excellent year for us, tied for the league lead in home runs, leading in runs batted in, and also hitting 305, but certainly not a threat for the Triple Crown when there's players hitting 372. 3rd in the league in OPS. Taking a look at the pitchers, don't have any pitchers among the league leaders at this point. But for the most part, ERAs are trending lower. Longoria has been really good, 2.91 ERA over 34 innings pitched. So glad to have him pitching at the major league level at this point. I think the pitching staff will get itself right. Hopefully we can have a big June. Again, another 16-12 kind of record, 3, 4, 5 games over 500, get the team into a point where we've got a winning record as we get into July, and the midway point of the season is what we're hoping for and expecting from this squad. And here in mid-June, Pirates have finally gotten over 500 at 38-37. Just beat the Yankees 7-2. And Isaiah Hill, 4 home runs in the game. Drove in 7, obviously had 4 runs scored. Here on June 17th, already has 30 home runs, 72 runs batted in, and is batting .331. So the investment in him, I think, will pay off. To have him at under arbitration expectations at the start of this year for the next 3 seasons. Who knows whether we'll be able to keep him for the long term. I think it's unlikely. We did just try to sign our starting catcher to a $2 million-ish a year extension that he asked us for. $2 million a year. $2 million-ish a year extension that he asked us for. And we're told by Mr. Nutting that we don't have the money in the budget to even sign that contract at this point. So clearly we are up against it financially, but as I mentioned, we are finally above 500, still 6.5 out in the division, only 2 out for the wild card at this point, and you can see Isaiah Hill still 30 points behind in the batting race, but his 30 home runs and his 72 RBIs put him well on the way to at least 2/3 of a Triple Crown. leading the league in OPS, leading the league in batter WAR. So having a big year for us, and a big part of our offense, obviously. You can see that we're 24th overall in runs scored in baseball at this point, but our team ERA is down to 9th. Take a look at the more detailed NL stats. And our offense is 11th, which is not great, but it is an improvement. And our runs allowed are down to tied for 8th, so we continue to make progress there. You can see we are 3 games over here in June. Hopefully we can get to the halfway point of the season and come out of the month of June a few games over 500. And we've made it to our midseason evaluation with Mr. Nutting. You can see the record is 44-39, 6.5 back in the division. He's excited by the team. Not happy that we haven't improved steals much. Happy that we're getting more fans in the seats. Do have a number of contracts expiring that we'll need to focus on offline. But it's been a respectable season so far. Taking a look at attendance, it's been really good recently. The team is playing better. So we are going to try to bump things up to $16 a ticket. See what that does. Fan interest is moving in the wrong direction, but the team is playing better. So we'll do our 1-year move up, and we'll make it a not immaterial increase. You can see expecting $484 in revenue. Go back that, and they think it's going to pump up revenue a ton. We'll find out whether we really keep getting that many fans in the seats, but obviously it would be nice if we're able to make a little bit extra money here. So that's the hope. As I talked about, fan interest has definitely been moving in the wrong direction and has deteriorated pretty significantly this season. But hopefully with the fact that we're now above 500, if we can get into the pennant race, really solidly. We're tied for second at this point, but 6.5 back. But we're only 2 out for the wild card. If we can get ourselves into a position where we're in a wild card slot, at least for the next couple months, that's probably going to help encourage some more people to come out to the stadium in Pittsburgh. And we've made it to the month of July, 47-40 record for the Pirates, 6 games out in the division, but I'm guessing we're probably getting pretty close to being a wild card team. Not surprisingly, Isaiah Hill, player of the month again, 380, 14 homers, 32 ribbies, 32 homers and 80 ribbies on the year while batting .328, so just a brilliant season for him. Tony Santana finally kind of living up to some of his potential. 44 strikeouts in 32 innings, 1.41 ERA, and had 5 wins in June to be pitcher of the month. And Alex Perkins, once again, National League Rookie of the Month, 317 batting average, 6 homers, 13 ribbies, 284 batting average with 18 homers and 39 driven in on the year. So things are going really well for Pittsburgh right now. Taking a look at the report, 18-9 record in June, so did even better than we had hoped. As you can see, we're now 7 games above 500, although we are 6 out in the division. Offense, 9th in runs scored. If we can stay in the top 10, as I've talked about, I think we'll be fine. Runs allowed kind of stabilizing around 8th. I think we can do better than that. Honestly, if we finish this year 9th in runs scored, I think we will be a playoff team, because I think that our pitching staff in the runs allowed will improve over the second half of the season. You can see our defense has also been kind of trending in a better direction than it did in the early weeks of the season. Let's take a look at the standings and see if we're actually... No, we're not a wild card yet. We're half a game out. So despite this recent push, which has got us in our own in second place in the Central, still not a playoff team if the season were to end today, but we are definitely trending in a good direction over the last couple of months. You can see we're still pretty close to selling out most games, so the little bump in ticket prices that we went and did, probably a positive thing. Probably should have gone higher, but it is what it is at this point. I only let myself raise it once, so I'm not going to go back on that rule. And taking a look at some of the stats midway through the season, Tony Santana 8-4 with a 3 ERA. Bobby Gonzalez has not been as great. Ricky Gotti 500 record but a 3.52 ERA. Luis Longoria, bringing him up, has really had a high correlation between when the team started playing much better. 5-1 record with a 2.89 ERA for the rookie pitcher. The issue with him is just going to be keeping him healthy, because he certainly has electric stuff, incredible movement. He's going to walk a lot of batters. He's walked 36 in the 62 and a third innings that he's pitched. But when he's only allowing 36 hits over 62 and a third innings, he can still be a pretty effective pitcher for us. So I'm really happy to have him on board. Looking at some of the relievers, Greg Gaylord, 22 saves since he took over as the closer. The ERA is still high, but I think that will come down as he spends some more time in the bullpen. Andy Ochoa, kind of a disappointing season, especially given that we did pick up him in arbitration this year, and he's making close to $4.8 million. That was kind of a stretch for us for a reliever. Thought he would be a lot more effective than the 5.26 ERA that he's put up so far this year. Hopefully he can get better in the second half. And then Omar Gaona, our lefty, with a brutal 6.97 ERA. But you can see the rest of the pitchers: Elijah Helton, former closer; Hugo Macias, free agent acquisition; the lefty Willie Arenales; and the right-hander Edgar Flores are all putting together pretty solid seasons and have all pitched, 35, 40, 45 innings so far this year. So been pretty useful and pretty busy out of the pen with those four guys. Turning to the batting, obviously it's all Isaiah Hill all the time. 4.9 WAR, hitting 328, 32 homers and 80 ribbies. Just another great start to the season for the player, who in 2 seasons in the pros, or 2 seasons in the majors, is a 2-time, soon-to-be 3-time All-Star, 2-time Silver Slugger winner, and he also won an MVP and a Rookie of the Year in his rookie season. So he looks like he is poised to have the best year of his career and potentially make a run at a Triple Crown. We'll see how that goes. Luis Linares, our shortstop, hitting pretty well for us, 293 batting average, and he is a very good defensive shortstop. Arbitration number going to be $7.5 million next year. We'll have to see whether we can keep him or not, but we'll deal with that when we get to the next season. Alex Perkins, talked about the rookie who we signed as a free agent. 18 homers and a 284 batting average and 310 at-bats. Gives us another left-handed bat for our lineup, which was important. Speaking of left-handed bats, Ramon Herrera, our new center fielder, hitting 273, but pretty good extra base power with 20 doubles, 5 triples, 7 home runs. So he's been an above-average offensive player, even though he's not quite the glove that we used to have out there with Carbajal. Carbajal still not really being used as a defensive substitute, hitting just 177, so that's a bit disappointing. Chris Gomez at third base, solid year. Not a great batting average. He never hits for a great batting average, but he does hit 18 homers and 40 runs driven in, put up a 1.3 WAR on the season. Tony Cook hitting 227 as utility infielder. Quinones 249 is our starting catcher. Victor Serrano at second base. I'd say he's been a little bit of a disappointment for the 25-year-old. Like his glove, and that's really what he's there for. Hitting just 240 without much power. Weren't expecting a ton of power. Hoped he might be a little better on the base paths. Only 4 stolen bases and a below 50% success rate, so that's not optimal. Ron Holloway hitting 252 as a backup catcher. Flavio Avanzi 294 as a utility infielder. The big disappointment has been Adrian Oliva. We thought he was going to be a cornerstone of our offense for the 1 year that we had him. We picked him up from Tampa Bay, traded away some prospects to get him, and he's hitting just 273 with 4 home runs. The 4 home runs isn't a shock. We would hope for more than that. But this is a guy who has basically hit 300, almost every season he's been in the majors, 312 career hitter. The 273 batting average he's putting up this year would be, almost 10 points below the worst that he's ever done. So hopefully he can catch fire a little bit in the second half and provide us with more offense, because he certainly hasn't lived up to expectations. Alex Gaines, another guy that we brought on to help us in that first base, third base, DH type of role, hitting just 206 with not a lot of power. So that's definitely been disappointing for him. We're going to have to figure out what we want to do with Gaines. We do have some guys in AAA that may be ready to help us. Who am I? The guy we've been DHing. Yeah, Sean Barley is a first baseman by trade, but we've been DHing him because he's not all that great defensively. But he's hitting 342 with 14 home runs down in AAA. If Gaines is not going to hit it all for us, might be time for us to bring up Barley instead. And then Andres Mendez, the younger, used to be a top prospect in the system, hitting 250, has no home runs this season in 204 at-bats, which is surprising. Left-handed bat who's kind of a part-time DH, backup first baseman, left fielder, right fielder for us. Negative WAR with the lack of power and the weak defense when he does play in the field. He's a guy whose roster spot definitely could become in jeopardy, either later this year or next year if we've got players to move up from AAA, which we probably do. So as we get ready for the month of July, we're going to spend some time thinking about whether we need to make some moves involving players like Mendez and Gaines, who just are not producing for us. But as I said earlier, the offense is actually doing overall what I want this offense to do. It's the pitching that's been a little disappointing this season so far, and I think hopefully the pitching will get better. Taking a look at the expanded standings, we're actually outperforming our run differential a little bit, which isn't the best thing in the world since we're still a half a game out of a playoff spot at this point. But as I've talked about, I think our pitching is going to be much better in the second half of the season. We've got good defensive players. You saw our second baseman and shortstop are both very solid defensively, not the greatest hitters in the world. And in center field, Herrera's not optimal, but he still has acceptable range for a center fielder with a decent error rating. Clearly, Carbajal has kind of fallen back a bit. His range and error are now the same as Morales, or Herrera. Why did I call him Morales? Sorry for using a generic name there. Sometimes these players come on and off the team so quick that I forget who they are, but I'm actually surprised that Herrera's range and error rating look the same as Carbajal at this point. Carbajal still with a much better arm, but no desire to move him back into a starting role with the way that Herrera's been hitting for us, given that he doesn't provide anything exceptional as far as defense except for a better arm. So before we finish the episode, we'll take a look at the international amateur free agents and see who we want to make an offer to. Center fielder Julio Castillo. Looks like a beautiful prospect. He is almost 18 years old, but solid defensively, probably more of a corner outfielder if he makes it to the majors. Good personality, good durability, nice bat with some speed. Looks like he could be a really solid hitter. Willie Perez, second baseman. Just brutal defensively. Like the bat, but he's an infielder who's not an infielder. You could play him in left field, but even that you wouldn't feel great about. He's young, barely 16 years old, has a little bit of speed, good bunter, but just doesn't really have a position defensively. And Juan Guerra, shortstop, stands out as one of the other top prospects, almost 17 years old. Not really a shortstop, but can probably play any other position in the infield and certainly could play short, but not great defensively. Like the bat, don't know much about his personality yet, has a little bit of speed. Don't hate him as a prospect. Certainly Guerra or Castillo would probably be the ways to go. Take a look at David Gonzalez, a center fielder, not all that exciting. And then catcher Heles Pontico Dubrel. Kind of mad defensively. He's got a little bit of home run power, but he's not all that exciting. So I think that Guerra or Castillo would be the batters we would go after. Only one pitcher available at all. Danny Quintana looks like a reliever, not a great personality. So not a lot of choices there with the international amateur free agents. I think Castillo is certainly the best bat. Love the personality, love the durability. But he's almost 18 years old. We've got a lot of outfielders in our system. Now, granted, he's 5-6 years away from being a major leaguer, so that shouldn't impact us. But I kind of like Juan Guerra. I think he's got a plus bat. You know, could potentially be a good contact hitter with some extra base power since he's got decent speed. Not going to hit a ton of home runs, but not going to be a horrible home run hitter. And he's very versatile defensively. As I said, can play any position in the infield. Actually, probably first base at only 6 feet might be his weakest. You know, he'd be a very good third baseman, a decent defensive second baseman, an okay defensive shortstop. But with the fact that he can hit a little bit, and he's not even 17 years old yet, and there's probably going to be a ton of competition for Castillo, I think I'm just going to go for Guerra right now and see if we can get him signed up before everyone else fails on Castillo, and then drops back to Guerra as their second choice. He's looking for $4 million. We're going to offer him the full $5 million. See what he thinks. And with that, we will conclude the episode. It's been a solid campaign so far for the Pirates. Definitely well on our way to the winning record that ownership wants from us. But as we've talked about, we want to be a playoff team this year. And at this point, we are half a game out. Hopefully, we didn't cost ourselves a playoff berth by waiting a little long to bring up Luis Longoria, since he has definitely been a revelation since we brought him on board, as we kind of expected he would be given his pitching profile there. But hopefully we can play even better over the second half of the season. We do have the capacity to take on a little bit of salary in trades. And as I talked about earlier, we've also got some help in AAA that could help us kind of towards the bottom end of our roster with some players who may give us a little better offense and or defense. So we're going to think about all of that stuff and talk about it in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.